So my friends, in this video we'll be taking a closer look at two of the most popular TVs of 2020 and hopefully helping you decide which one you may purchase. On the left is the LG C10 and on the right is the LG B10. But do you call it B10 and C10 or BX and CX? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to hit the red button to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up and click the notification bell to get my next video first. Okay, so before we get into the main video, just a couple of points of disclosure. Both of these TVs I have bought. I'm not being asked to say anything good or bad about them, so I will literally call it as I see it. We have got everything running into my Denon 4K amp, which is down on the left-hand side, and we're using two identical 8K HDMI cables to connect out to both TVs. Okay, so one of your big buying decisions may be down to size because the BX only comes in a 55-inch version and a 65-inch version, whereas the CX also has a 48-inch and 77-inch. In terms of the design, they are pretty much identical. There are differences in the stand, which I'll come on to in a moment, but the actual unit itself is identical. The measurements, the thinness, they both look absolutely stunning. The only slight difference on my picture here is the fact that I've got some lights on the back of my CX. Comparing the price differences between these models is also going to be a factor in your buying decision, and for my friends in the US, it's going to be significantly easier. There's effectively $500 difference between the 55 and 65-inch version, no matter which one you buy. $13.99 compared to $18.99 for the CX, and $12.99 compared to $17.99 for the BX. In the UK, however, it gets a lot more confusing. With the CX version, there's a £600 difference, which is $13.99 or $19.99, depending on the 55 or 65-inch model. And on the BX, it's even bigger. It's £700 difference between the 55 and the 65-inch model. Now, depending on when you're watching this video, it may have changed again, so links for the latest price will be in the description. Okay, now on to stands. Now, in my full reviews on both of these TVs, I've mentioned that they're both a little bit awkward if you've got a soundbar. Now, that Sonos Beam was a very small soundbar, and both of these stands are not really designed to have a soundbar in front of it. You do lose a certain amount of screen real estate when you're watching if there is a soundbar placed right in front. It's also worth noting that the C10 has the much wider footprint of stand. It will take up significantly more space on a TV unit, and the B10 is significantly almost half the size. It may also look very similar to the C10 stand, but this is made from plastic, whereas the C10 is a very nice metal, and it's significantly heavier and feels a lot more solid. The CX is definitely the better TV for gamers. All four ports have HDMI 2.1, supporting 4K at 120Hz. With the B10, however, only the two rear ports support the 4K at 120Hz, which may be a bit of a problem if you're planning on wall mounting your TV. And also, you'll notice that port 3 is the EARC, or the ARC port, so therefore if you are using that to a soundbar or to a sound system, then it does mean that you've only actually got one 4K at 120Hz port available. So in order to test the picture quality of these two sets and do it as a side-by-side test, I put both of the TVs into standard mode and then with my standard user settings that I did for my previous reviews. Now, it was very obvious right from the start that there was a big difference in terms of brightness between the two. The CX is around 20 to 25% brighter. Now, I was able to compensate slightly for that by raising the OLED light on the BX, and as I had the 55-inch version, it didn't really affect picture quality at all. Now, viewing angles on these TVs are fantastic, and it's no different on these two. And side by side, I couldn't really tell any difference at all. There wasn't any problem with either set. Now, the one theme with all of these images that you're going to see is that the CX is obviously slightly brighter, and so therefore that's going to be pretty much on every image. But what you've got to remember, folks, is if you were only looking at one of these TVs, would you really be noticing any problems? So the viewing angle picture quality is very similar on both. In my individual reviews on both of these TVs, I mentioned about how reflective they are, and if you are in a bright room with lots of windows, that will be an issue. There isn't any difference between the two. There isn't one which performs better than the other. They're both much more suited to a darker room. Obviously, these don't get as bright as QLED TVs, and that's another reason why they perform better in a slightly darker atmosphere. Now, the majority of most of the specs on both of these TVs are identical. However, the C10 does have the A9 Generation 3 processor, and it has AI Picture Pro, which I do think makes a significant difference, especially in terms of upscaling. Now, if you look at some of these images now, and if I zoom in, the CX on the left does seem a little bit sharper. Now, again, I am splitting hairs to a degree, and it may not be as noticeable on whatever device you're watching this on compared to what it's like in reality, but there definitely is an improvement on the one on the left, and I think that must be down to the artificial intelligence and possibly the processor. Don't get me wrong, they are both incredible pictures, but I think the CX does just edge it. That upgrade in processor also makes a difference for the general operation of the TV. I've had this TV, the C10, for a few months now, and I definitely noticed that the B10 was slightly slower in all operations, which you would expect with the slower processor. Those picture improvements may also be down to the contrast enhancer, which is present on the C10 but not the B10. Now, all of these little things, in my opinion, are just pushing you towards the B10 as being the better TV, which you would obviously expect. However, a couple of things you need to bear in mind. The picture quality differences are so minimal, as hopefully some of these pictures will show you, that you're not really getting a bad TV with the B10. You're still getting an incredible set, an incredible quality with to die for black levels, but you're just getting slightly more with the C10, and that may well be the thing that tips you over the edge. However, any saving is a good saving in my opinion, so if budget is an issue at all for you, well then you're not going to be disappointed when it comes to the B10. Now, when it comes to gaming, we mentioned earlier about the HDMI 2.1 ports, the B10 just having 2 of those and the C10 having all 4. Now, there's been various updates over the course of the last few months, and now both of these sets do support G-Sync, FreeSync, variable refresh rate. They both have response times from around about 1 milliseconds. They also have auto low latency mode and support HDIG. So they are incredible machines for gaming. Other than a very slight difference in the contrast, which we mentioned earlier, I couldn't find any difference in playing one or the other. They both felt as good as each other. Now, what we don't know yet, because unfortunately I'm not Marcus Brownlee and so I've not already been sent the PS5, we don't know whether the B10 with its slower processor will have any issues with those newer consoles. But obviously we're going to try and get our hands on the consoles as soon as we possibly can, and hopefully we'll be able to bring that to you in a later video, hopefully later this month or towards the beginning of December. So guys, this is going to be something we're going to need to park for the time being, but certainly at the moment, just with my mere PS4, the gaming was incredible on both, and I couldn't really split it. Okay, my friends, I'm going to start to summarize now, and what I'd have to say is anyone that buys either one of these TVs is going to be absolutely delighted with it. The picture quality, as most people know with these OLEDs, is absolutely amazing. If you've chosen to go for an OLED, then you've probably gotten over the potential screen burn issue. That's something which obviously is going to be a nag to some people in the back of their head. So if you're considering these two TVs, then you've probably already overcome that worry. Certainly it's not something that I'm that bothered about, and in the few months that I've had the C10, I've not seen any evidence at all of any burn-in. Now, the specs between these TVs are so incredibly similar. They're both 120Hz panels. They both support Cinema HDR, Dolby Vision, HDR10, HLG, Dolby Vision IQ, HDR, dynamic tone mapping. So all of these things mean that they're very close. However, you definitely are seeing an improvement with the C10. And I think that with the pricing of the C10 at the moment, it being the slightly older, so therefore it's already come down a little bit more in price, because they're so close, it's definitely worth going that route. However, depending on when you're watching this video, I don't know what that gap will be between the C10 and the B10, and you may find that hundreds of pounds, hundreds of dollars have now come off of the B10, and so if that's the saving to be made, well then you're not going to be getting a bad machine. The only other thing that I would possibly sit on the fence and wait for is to see how that B10 does perform with the newer consoles, and does it have any issues at all. But guys, it's very clear that both of these TVs are incredible, and whatever way you go, you're going to be getting an amazing TV set. I'd love to know what your initial thoughts are, whether you think that it's worth just spending that extra now and going for the C10, or do you sit and wait for the B10 to reduce a little bit in price? We've obviously got the holiday season coming up, and so therefore it may go even lower. But guys, I hope this video has given you some idea as to how close and also some of those differences between these two models. Thank you so much for spending your time watching this video. If it has been at all helpful, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed, hit that red button. Guys, I look forward to seeing you on the next video from All Things Tech.